There are moments in life when everything feels strangely quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, but quiet in a way that feels almost unsettling, as if the world is pausing for something you cannot yet see. For some people, these moments come after years of confusion, loss, and feeling like nothing ever truly moved forward. Doors closed, plans collapsed, relationships shifted, and no matter how hard they tried, it seemed like life kept resetting them back to the beginning. But what if that feeling was never random? What if the moments when everything seems to fall apart are actually the moments when everything is quietly being rearranged? Many people reach a point where they look back at their life and notice a strange pattern. Every time they started building something that didn't truly align with who they were becoming, something interrupted it. A job suddenly ended. A friendship slowly faded. A path that once felt certain began to feel empty. At first, it felt like failure, like bad luck, like the universe itself was working against them. But later, something different becomes visible. The things that disappeared were often the very things that would have kept them stuck. Have you ever wondered why certain chapters of your life ended so abruptly? Why the people you thought would stay forever eventually walked away? Why the plans you believed in with all your heart never fully materialized? For some individuals, these events begin to form a deeper realization. Not everything that leaves your life is a loss. Sometimes it is a clearing. Think about a field that has been overgrown for years. From the outside, it looks full. It looks alive. But beneath the surface, the soil is exhausted. New growth cannot happen until the ground is cleared, until space is made for something different. Human lives can follow a similar pattern. There are seasons where everything you once relied on slowly disappears. And in those moments, people often panic. They try to rebuild the same structures again. They chase the same approval, the same environments, the same identities that once defined them. But what if those identities were never meant to last? What if the real transformation only begins when those old structures finally collapse? Across cultures and belief systems, there is a recurring idea that sometimes life removes things before it introduces something new. Not as punishment, but as preparation. The challenge is that preparation rarely feels comfortable while it is happening. It feels confusing. It feels lonely. And sometimes it feels like you are the only one going through it. You watch others move forward with stable paths and predictable routines, while your own life seems to be constantly interrupted by unexpected turns. People may even question your decisions. They may wonder why nothing seems to stay stable around you. But what they cannot see is the internal shift that is quietly taking place. Because when life repeatedly removes things that no longer fit, it forces a person to confront a deeper question. Who are you when everything familiar disappears? Without the titles, the roles, the expectations of others, what remains? For some, that question becomes the beginning of a profound reset. Not a reset that happens overnight, but one that begins with awareness. An awareness that the path you once followed may have been shaped by pressure, by fear, or by the desire to belong. And once you see that clearly, something inside you begins to change. The strange part is that this shift often begins during the darkest seasons. During the nights when the future feels uncertain. During the quiet hours when a person begins questioning everything they once believed about themselves. That is where the reset truly starts. Not in the outside world, but deep within the way a person begins to see their own life. There comes a point when a person begins to notice that the life they were trying so hard to build no longer fits the person they are becoming. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is subtle, like a quiet realization that the things that once excited you now feel strangely empty. Conversations that once felt meaningful now feel shallow. Goals that once felt urgent now feel like someone else's dream. And that realization can be deeply unsettling. Because if the old path no longer fits, the question becomes unavoidable. What comes next? Most people spend years trying to follow a script they never consciously chose. From childhood, expectations begin forming around them. What success should look like? What stability should look like? What kind of life is considered respectable, acceptable, or safe? So people build their lives around those expectations. They study what they are told to study. They pursue careers that promise security. They surround themselves with environments that seem socially approved. But for some individuals, something inside them keeps resisting that script. At first, they try to ignore it. They push forward, convincing themselves that things will eventually feel right. Yet the deeper they go down that road, the louder the inner tension becomes. It is like wearing clothes that are slowly becoming too tight. From the outside, everything still appears normal, but inside there is constant pressure, and eventually, something has to change. Sometimes that change happens through a moment that forces reflection, a disappointment, a sudden shift, a period of silence where distractions fall away and a person is left alone with their thoughts. Those moments are uncomfortable because they remove the noise that once kept deeper questions hidden. Why am I really on this path? Whose expectations am I trying to satisfy? What kind of life actually reflects who I am becoming? These questions rarely arrive all at once. They appear slowly, like distant echoes that grow louder over time. And once they begin, it becomes difficult to silence them. This is where many people face an invisible crossroads. One path is familiar. It means continuing the same patterns, rebuilding the same structures, and convincing yourself that stability is more important than authenticity. It is the path that most people around you will encourage because it looks safe and predictable. The other path is far less clear. It requires stepping away from roles that once defined you. It requires questioning beliefs that once felt certain. It requires accepting that you may not yet know where the road is leading, and that uncertainty can feel terrifying. Yet it is also where genuine transformation begins, when a person stops chasing external validation and starts listening more carefully to their inner awareness. Something remarkable begins to shift. The constant need to prove oneself slowly fades. The pressure to follow someone else's timeline begins to lose its grip. Instead, a different perspective starts to form. Life is no longer about forcing outcomes. It becomes more about alignment. About paying attention to what feels meaningful, honest, and deeply consistent with your values. And once that awareness takes root, the old version of life becomes harder to return to. You begin noticing patterns you once ignored. You recognize environments that drain your energy. You see how certain influences shaped your decisions without you realizing it. It can feel like waking up from a long sleep, but awakening is only the beginning of the reset. Because awareness alone does not immediately rebuild your life. In fact, it often creates a temporary gap. The old identity is fading, yet the new one has not fully formed. That space can feel uncertain, even fragile. But it is also where the foundation of a completely different future quietly begins to take shape. That uncertain space between who you were and who you are becoming can feel like standing in the middle of a bridge at night. Behind you is the life that once defined you, Ahead of you is something you cannot fully see yet. And for a moment, it may seem as if you are suspended between two worlds. Many people turn back at this stage, not because they lack strength, but because the unknown can feel overwhelming. The human mind naturally seeks stability. It wants clear answers, predictable outcomes, and familiar structures. When those things disappear, the instinct is often to rebuild the old life simply because it is recognizable. But the people who experience a true reset usually notice something important during this phase. Going backward no longer feels possible. The habits, environments, and expectations that once shaped their identity now feel like costumes that no longer fit. Even if they tried to return, something inside them would constantly remind them that the old version of life was never fully authentic. This realization can create a strange mixture of emotions. There may be moments of freedom, where you suddenly feel lighter without the weight of old expectations. But there can also be moments of deep uncertainty. You might ask yourself whether leaving the familiar behind was the right decision. You might wonder why your path feels so different from the people around you. These questions are natural. Transformation rarely happens in a straight line. It unfolds in phases, often with periods of confusion followed by moments of clarity. One day, you feel certain that you are moving in the right direction. The next day, you may question everything again. But if you pay close attention during this stage, another pattern begins to appear. The very challenges that once seemed like obstacles start revealing hidden lessons. Situations that tested your patience may have been shaping resilience. Periods of isolation may have been creating space for deeper self-awareness. Unexpected changes may have been redirecting your focus towards something more meaningful. In other words, what once looked like disruption begins to look more like preparation. This shift in perspective is powerful because it changes how a person relates to their own story. Instead of seeing life as a series of random setbacks, they begin recognizing how each chapter contributed to their growth. And when that understanding settles in, something else changes as well. Fear begins to lose some of its power. Not because uncertainty disappears, but because you realize that uncertainty has always been part of the process. Every time life seemed to reset you, it was quietly guiding you away from paths that were never meant to define your future. Once that awareness deepens, the question is no longer, "Why is this happening to me?" The question becomes something far more constructive. What is this moment trying to teach me? That shift alone can transform the way you move forward. Instead of resisting change, you begin observing it. Instead of clinging to the past, you start focusing on what new possibilities may be emerging. You begin trusting that periods of instability can also carry hidden direction. And slowly, almost without noticing it, your mindset evolves. You stop measuring your progress by how closely your life resembles someone else's path. You stop chasing approval from people who cannot understand your journey. You start paying attention to something deeper than public validation. You begin building a life that reflects your true awareness. But there is another truth that many people only realize later. The reset does not only change your external circumstances. It changes how you see yourself entirely. When that internal shift finally begins to settle, something remarkable happens. The person you once were starts to feel like a distant memory, not because you reject your past, but because you understand it differently now. The struggles, the confusion, the unexpected endings that once felt like chaos begin to look like turning points that shaped who you are becoming. And that realization changes the way you move through the world. Before the reset, life may have felt like a constant effort to prove something, to prove your worth, your intelligence, your value to others. Many people spend years trying to meet expectations that were never truly their own. They chase approval, stability, and recognition, believing that these things will finally bring a sense of peace. But after a deep reset, the motivation begins to shift. You are no longer trying to prove yourself in the same way. Instead, you begin focusing on living with clarity and intention. The pressure to follow the crowd starts to fade, and in its place comes a quieter confidence, not loud or boastful, but steady and grounded. This confidence does not come from having every answer. It comes from understanding yourself more honestly than before. You begin recognizing what genuinely matters to you. Not what society praises, not what others expect, but what aligns with your principles and your sense of purpose. Decisions become less about external rewards and more about internal consistency. And that change affects everything. The way you approach opportunities becomes different. Instead of chasing every possibility out of fear of missing out, you start choosing more carefully. You pay attention to whether something truly reflects your values or simply looks impressive from the outside. The same shift happens with relationships. You become more aware of the energy people bring into your life. Some connections grow stronger because they are built on sincerity and mutual respect. Others naturally fade because they were based on roles you no longer play. At first, these changes might surprise the people around you. They may notice that you respond differently than before. You no longer react to every criticism. You no longer feel the need to explain every decision. In many situations, you simply remain calm and focused on your direction. This does not mean life suddenly becomes easy. Challenges still appear. Unexpected turns still happen. The difference is that you approach them with a new perspective. Instead of immediately seeing difficulty as a setback, you consider the possibility that it may carry insight or redirection. That mindset creates resilience. It allows you to move through uncertainty without losing your sense of direction. You understand that growth often requires patience, and that meaningful change rarely happens overnight. And this is where the idea of a reset becomes truly powerful. A reset is not about erasing your past. It is about reinterpreting it. Every experience, both positive and painful, becomes part of the foundation you stand on now. The lessons remain, the wisdom remains, the awareness you gained continues guiding your choices. So when people say that a life can change suddenly, what they often mean is this. There comes a moment when a person finally understands the deeper pattern behind their journey. From that moment forward, they stop resisting the process of growth. They stop trying to rebuild the same life that once limited them. Instead, they begin walking forward with clarity, patience, and a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that sometimes the most powerful transformations begin quietly, in the moments when life seems to be resetting everything. There is another layer to this reset that many people do not recognize until much later. At first, the changes feel personal. They feel like individual struggles, private realizations, and silent decisions that happen far away from the attention of others. But over time, a deeper understanding begins to emerge. When a person truly changes from within, their presence begins to change the environment around them. Not in dramatic or mysterious ways, but in subtle shifts that become noticeable with time. The way they speak becomes more thoughtful. The way they react becomes more measured. Situations that once triggered anger or insecurity now meet a calmer response. This quiet stability has a powerful effect. People who are used to reacting emotionally may feel unsettled by someone who responds with patience. People who thrive on chaos may feel uncomfortable around someone who values clarity and honesty. At the same time, those who are searching for deeper meaning often feel drawn toward individuals who carry this kind of grounded perspective. And this is where the reset begins to extend beyond the individual. Without trying to influence anyone directly, your actions start reflecting the lessons you have learned. When others see someone moving through difficulty with composure, they begin questioning their own reactions. When they notice someone making decisions based on principles rather than pressure, it challenges the assumptions they may have followed for years. This is how quiet change spreads. It does not happen through speeches or declarations. It happens through example, through consistency, through the steady demonstration that a person can grow beyond the patterns that once defined them. However, there is something important to remember here. Not everyone will understand this shift. Some people may interpret your calmness as distance. Others may believe you have changed too much, simply because you no longer participate in the same habits or conversations. When this happens, it can feel isolating. But this is often part of the transition. Growth naturally changes the environments where you feel comfortable. The places that once felt familiar may no longer resonate in the same way. The discussions that once filled your time may now feel repetitive or shallow. Instead of forcing yourself back into those spaces, you begin allowing life to introduce new environments that better reflect your current perspective. And slowly, new connections begin to appear. These connections are usually different from the ones that came before. They tend to be more intentional, more thoughtful, and built on shared values rather than convenience. Conversations become deeper. Mutual respect becomes more important than approval. This stage of the reset is where many people finally begin to feel a sense of alignment. The inner clarity you develop during difficult periods starts matching the life you are building around you. Your choices reflect your awareness. Your priorities reflect your values. The direction you follow feels steady, even when the future is still unfolding. And perhaps the most surprising realization arrives here. The reset was never about becoming someone completely new. It was about uncovering the person you were always capable of becoming, once the noise, expectations, and distractions that surrounded you began to fade. The struggles you faced were not meaningless interruptions. They were moments that forced reflection, moments that stripped away illusions, moments that encouraged deeper awareness. Looking back, the path may still appear unpredictable, but it also reveals something consistent. Each challenge, each ending, each unexpected turn carried the possibility of growth. And once you recognize that pattern, life no longer feels like a series of random events. It begins to feel like a journey of gradual awakening. Do not multitask, where every reset brings you closer to a clearer understanding of yourself and the direction you are meant to pursue.